Pilla talks taxes. He has been for over 45 years. There isn't a human on the planet with more experience solving problems on behalf of taxpayers. He wants to solve your problem whether you know you have one or not. So if you do have a tax problem, get a hold of him by calling his office or visiting his website. If you don't have a tax problem, your current tax problem is taxes themselves. So let's get into the policy issues of today. And today we got a bit of another win here. The Taxpayer Assistance and Service Act is moving through Congress bit by bit, piece by piece. Give us some background on this bill.
Yeah, this was a massive proposal that was put in the Senate Finance Committee last January, about a year ago, and it had 10 different parts to it, 10 different titles, if you will, that dealt with tax court issues, collection due process, IRS notices, the taxpayer advocate. There's all kinds of elements to this thing that we've been covering on this podcast for quite a bit of time here now as this thing moves through Congress. I was hoping, Josh, that the Taxpayer Assistance and Service Act would be introduced in a comprehensive form, the massive bill, the 10 different titles that I was talking about, but that's not how it's working. The way they're doing it is they're breaking it down in little pieces and sending it through Congress a little piece at a time.
The latest development
is that the House of Representatives has now passed what's called the Tax Court Improvement Act. The Tax Court Improvement Act was one of the 10 titles to the Taxpayer Assistance and Service Act. They broke the tax court aspects out of it and they passed that separately.
Are they going to keep doing this, breaking it into 10 different bills and pass them individually?
I think they probably will. Yeah.
Why are they trying to milk wins? I don't understand.
I think they're trying to make it easier to get the thing through as opposed to putting it through in one big giant piece and having people pick it apart. The irony of this, Josh, is that the Taxpayer Assistance and Service Act was submitted with bipartisan support. Both the Democrats and the Republicans, even liberal Democrats like Ron Wyden on the Senate Finance Committee, was very much in favor of the Taxpayer Assistance and Service Act and has been instrumental in getting the bills passed that have been passed and signed into law up to this point. So there's no good reason why they're breaking this thing down into pieces other than to suggest that maybe there is some flack someplace and they want to try to avoid it.
Could it also be a condition of obfuscation by quantity, in the sense of maybe there's one of them that they do want to alter to a certain degree that we wouldn't like, and they just want to drown out that particular one with a bunch of noise?
That's certainly possible, Josh. Anything's possible when you're dealing with any legislature, whether it's Congress, a state legislature, or even local county boards all over the United States. Anything can happen with these things when you're going through the legislative process. So my reaction is, as long as the thing gets through, then that's something that I think is very beneficial. And what's going on with this latest edition here now, the Tax Court Improvement Act, is something that is going to help tax court litigation, no question about that.
So for those who don't know, explain exactly what tax court is.
Yeah, the tax court is a separate federal court that was set up as a tribunal specifically to hear tax cases. You've got the United States district courts, and those courts are courts of general jurisdictions. Any kind of a complaint that you have against another person, a business, or the government that raises federal questions can be brought in the United States District Court. But when we're talking about tax issues, long ago, I'm talking about the early 1930s, the Congress set up the United States Tax Court to function as a tribunal where they had judges that were specifically trained with specific backgrounds in tax practice to hear tax cases. The United States District Court, the case might involve a civil rights case one day, it might involve a criminal case involving drug dealing another day, it might involve any number of things. There could be literally hundreds of different issues that come before a given tax court judge. Decades ago, it was decided that because of the complexity and uniqueness of the Internal Revenue Code, taxpayers would be better served by having a tribunal staffed with judges who are exclusively tax-related judges. A lot of these judges are former tax lawyers. A lot of them come out of the Department of Justice Tax Division. Some of them have come out of the Internal Revenue Service's Office of Chief Counsel. Some of them are named to the bench out of private practice, but they all have a very extensive tax background. So they're not hearing a civil rights rights case one day and a criminal drug dealing case the next day. All they're doing is hearing tax court cases. Now, here's the other thing that's very important about the tax court. If there's a dispute with the IRS over an amount of money that's owed, you have to pay the tax first. If the IRS says you owe $50,000, you have to pay that money first and then make a claim for refund. And if the IRS denies the claim for refund, then you've got the right to file a lawsuit for refund in the district court. In the United States District Court, it's a post-payment option. You have to pay the tax first, then claim a refund, and then you sue for a refund if your claim is denied. It's a post-payment review. In the United States Tax Court, it's pre-payment review. You don't have to pay the tax first, and it costs a $60 filing fee to get a case in the United States Tax Court. And so now you have the opportunity to get this case before a tax court judge with the authority to reverse whatever the IRS did, and you do it without having to pay the tax in advance. Now, there's another advantage to a United States tax court case. When you file a tax court case, it involves a dispute over dollars and cents. That case is going to the Office of Appeals before it ever goes to litigation. So you've got the opportunity to settle a case without the need of a trial when you're going to the tax court. This is very important because it gives the taxpayer leverage to get a settlement out of the IRS that's reasonable, accurately reflects the law and facts of the case. I've been representing people in front of the United States Tax Court for decades. We have tremendous success in these cases because you get an appeals officer whose job is to negotiate a settlement with the taxpayer and an IRS attorney representing the government that will not defend the IRS in cases where the agency is simply wrong. We get settlements in these cases all the time that are very favorable to the taxpayer.
So tax court for taxes, everybody involved with the tax court is just specialized in the absurdity that is the tax code and tax law, which of course, obviously you need specialization in because it's so big and broad.
Oh yeah, there's no question about it. There are a lot of court decisions out there that talk about not only the complexity of the tax law, but the fact that judges in the ordinary district courts are really not suited to hear these cases on a routine basis. And so the tax court is the best place to be, in my opinion, in the vast majority of these disputes.
It makes the most sense where you have a special problem. And if the special problem is the government stealing your money, you go to the specialist. It just makes sense that in terms of putting your situation in the hands of someone who knows what they're doing. Now, that's all just about what tax court is. That's not the key points of the bill, right?
Yeah, you're exactly right. This is the background history of the tax court, and this bill is very particular as to the changes it makes to tax court procedures.
So what are the key points that are being changed in tax court procedure by this, let's name it properly here?
The name is the Tax Court Improvement Act.
So what improvements are being acted upon the tax court with the tax court?
There's two major things, Josh. There's a number of things, but two things really warrant our focus here on the podcast. Number one is expanded discovery. When you're in any court litigation, you have the right as a litigant to access all of the evidence that the other side is going to present in your case. There are rules of procedure in the tax court rules that allow for discovery. One of the discovery rules is a deposition where you have the opportunity to sit down and talk to a witness. Now, that witness testifies in court. Now, this is very common in district court litigations, but it's not very common in tax court litigation because the tax court rules limit the ability to get discovery. They've changed that for the better. The other thing that is very important, and we've talked about this point in this podcast over the last year, there's been a series of court decisions that have come out all the way up to the United States Supreme Court on the question of whether filing a case in the United States tax court is jurisdictional. You have to meet the timing deadline or you lose your right to the case. There's a Supreme Court decision from 2022 called Boechler versus Commissioner, that's Boechler versus Commissioner, that made the ruling. And Josh, I fell out of my chair when I read this because I didn't think there was any way that this was possible. That court ruled that if you miss the statutory deadline for filing a case in the tax court, that doesn't mean you automatically lose your right to a hearing. The court ruled in the Supreme Court. It's a very good thing, no question about it.
No wonder we were surprised they ruled that way.
The court ruled that the tax court has the authority to accept a filed petition to start a case, protect the taxpayer's rights in situations where, due to circumstances beyond the taxpayer's control, he couldn't get the case filed on time. It's called equitable tolling, meaning that the court can stop that deadline from ticking, give the taxpayer more time to file their case if these unusual circumstances prevented filing. Well, after the case, a number of cases have come along where there have been similar rulings, but still have friction in the tax court where the tax court itself itself is taking the position that it is bound by that statutory deadline, even though the Supreme Court said it's not. And so now what's part of the Tax Court Improvement Act is that they are codifying this equitable tolling doctrine so that there is no confusion that a missed deadline does not automatically mean that you lose your right to an action in the court.
I certainly know that
The wheels of justice grind slowly, but it's just such deliberation that ensures due process of law.
except for when the wheels of justice grind so slowly that you miss your deadline and you don't get your justice.
When the wheels of justice grind in such a way that the individual gets caught in the gears and gets ground into powder as a result of it, then that's not due process either, for sure.
It's not a process that I want to have anything to do with. So you've explained discovery, you've explained tolling. Is there any other details about the Tax Court Improvement Act that we should be aware of?
I'm a little concerned about the tolling element. The good news is that the proposed statutory change would very clearly amend the law that would then make it crystal clear that the court has equitable tolling jurisdiction, authority, let's say, in deficiency actions. Now, a deficiency action is when the IRS believes that you owe additional tax. They can't unilaterally assess that tax liability. They have to mail out what's called a notice of deficiency. A notice of deficiency is a final administrative determination that says the IRS believes you owe X. If you disagree with that decision, you can no longer bring it up with the IRS. Now it's a court matter. You either pay the tax and file a claim for refund or a suit for refund in the district court. That's a post-payment option. Or you exercise your right to go to the United States Tax Court. That's the prepayment option. All right. So in the United States Tax Court, Code Section 6213 gives the tax court the jurisdiction to hear a deficiency action, to review a notice of deficiency and determine whether the IRS's decision is right or wrong. Most of the time they're wrong.
So that's a good question to know.
The proposed amendment in the Tax Court Improvement Act will change that code section 6213 to provide for equitable tolling under certain circumstances, but only in deficiency actions. Now, here's the problem with that, Josh. There are all kinds of different cases that the tax court can hear. They can hear cases involving collection due process appeals. They can hear cases involving innocent spouse cases. They can hear cases involving interest abatement actions. And so if you believe that you've been improperly charged with interest, the tax court has the right to review that and reverse the IRS's decision. All right. The tax court has the jurisdiction to review worker classification cases. These are very common, where a business will have an individual performing services for the business, and that business classifies the worker as an independent contractor. The IRS comes along and says that person should have been an employee, and so now we're going to assess all the back taxes, penalties, and interest on that transaction, on the payment of that worker, as if he were an employee and not an independent contractor. That's called a worker classification case. The tax court has jurisdiction to review those cases as well. There's about 7 or 8 different areas of the law where the tax court has jurisdiction.
Narrowing it down to deficiency is a really bad issue then, essentially.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. The proposal changes only deficiency jurisdiction. It doesn't change anything else. And here's what's troubling about that, Josh. The Bochler case that I talked about just a minute ago, that wasn't a deficiency case. That was a collection due process appeal. And even though the Supreme Court said that the tax court has this equitable jurisdiction to determine whether the deadline should be tolled in a CDP case, Congress has not written that into the proposed law. And so the question I ask is, why have they done that? Why don't we have a comprehensive change to the law so that every single provision of the tax court's jurisdiction is changed to provide for equitable tolling? This is only going to help in one of about 7 or 8 areas. And it's going to be a big help in that one area, but it doesn't address all the rest of the areas where this comes up. And so that's what concerns me about this.
Perfect isn't the enemy of the good, but this is just like, why though?
Yeah, you're exactly right. I couldn't agree with that more. You should never let the perfect be the enemy of the good. That is very true. But on the other hand, these kinds of law changes don't come around every day. What comes around every day are the dollars and cents elements of the tax code, where they change the tax brackets and rates. This is deductible and that's not deductible, and this gives you a credit and that doesn't give you a credit. They change that stuff all the time. But this procedural stuff, it doesn't get changed very often at all. And so this is an opportunity to make a very important change, and I think they're missing the boat on this, at least partially. Absolutely.
You got anything else before we wrap it up?
I don't think so.
All right. That's all for this week. Thanks for watching, taxpayers. Remember, there is no such thing as a hopeless tax case. If you think yours is the exception, get a hold of Dan here. He can help you see the daylight. Dan, tell them where else they can follow along with your taxpayers.
Yeah, follow me on social media. I'm at Pilla Talks Taxes. I'm primarily on TikTok, Facebook, Truth Social, and right here on YouTube. Make sure you like the videos, subscribe to my channel, share these videos out, especially to your state and local representatives, your senators, and your congressmen at the federal level. If you've got a tax problem, go to my website, TaxHelpOnline. Buy any book at any price point off my website. You get a free 15-minute consultation directly and personally with me. So go there right now, TaxHelpOnline.com. We can help solve your problem.